Thank you for joining me. Let's do a quick round of self-introduction. So please tell us about yourself and what your companies are doing. Bethany, let's start with you.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you for inviting me to be part of the panel and for including Capsida in this wonderful conference. My name is Bethany Mancilla. I am the Chief Business Officer for Capsida Biotherapeutics. Capsida is a clinical stage, next-generation genetic medicine company developing a pipeline of both wholly owned and partnered programs for both rare as well as common diseases.
Great. Okay.
Hi there. I'm Ken Schultz. I'm a medical doctor, originally in emergency medicine. I'm now leading Trethera, which is a UCLA spun-out company with a first-in-class drug in phase 1 trials in ALS and also solid tumors.
Okay. My name is Blaise Staab. I'm our Chief Commercial Officer at CleopatraRx. Thank you, UCLA, for having us at this great event. CleopatraRx is a women's health company. We have the only menopause treatment that treats cognition, or that's designed to treat cognition. And it's a commercial ready product, and we're selling it today.
Mm-hmm. All right, and it's good to be here. Thanks UCLA for having us. Nathan Wheeler, I'm the Vice President and Head of Operations with Pelage Pharmaceuticals. We are a UCLA spin-out, actually, from the company around some technology that was founded here at the university. And we are a regenerative medicines company that's exploring the use of a topical product for androgenetic alopecia, which is male and female pattern hair loss. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So throughout today, we heard many gloom and doom projections, from tariff through FDA cuts and so on. And, those of you who joined us yesterday heard some of the med devices companies saying, tariffs are going to really hurt our profitability by 40% at least. How does that look from the biotech side? How are you guys navigating through NIH cuts, FDA changes, and so on? Nathan, do you want to start?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think it's a scenario that's still very much up in the air, and we're all still continuing to react. Certainly, as it relates to development, and maybe I'll speak specifically to changes at FDA. I think there's a lot of unknown and a lot of uncertainty about the impact that the global economics are having on how we develop drugs. The key experts who are weighing in now, there's changes in personnel, there's turnover in certain divisions of FDA. So I think that a lot of this is taking it in stride and making sure that we're sort of communicating the unknowns and uncertainties with our key stakeholders, investors, and some of our development partners to sort of just do what we can to wait till we get the clarity, and then we can sort of proceed on a path forward.
Me next?
Sure.
Anyway, yeah. I think fortunately for us, we have a commercial product, so we haven't necessarily, it's it's commercialized in the United States, so we haven't had as much as a concern with the international impacts of this. But when you think about it, we are in the middle of a funding round here, or just starting a funding round, and so I was initially kind of worried about investors being ready to invest in something like this. But it really is in times like this, in uncertainty, investors go towards something that doesn't have as much risk. And so we are a product that's different from typical HRT products. And so we bind specifically to estrogen receptors in the brain, which is different from the conventional HRT. And so when you look at us, you could be seen as a less risky investment. And so something that's very commercialized today. And so that is one of our advantages through this time of uncertainty.
No, we're kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. We're pre-revenue in phase 1 trials. So without a commercialized product, we've taken a really hard look at some of the cost. The biggest cost bucket for us is the clinical trials that we're running. And at least in our case, we've been able to pull that inside the company rather than have that outsourced to the CRO, which has led to significant cost savings, and I would argue even an increase in quality.
So from a regulatory perspective, our most recent experience is that we had submitted an IND last month, and last week we got approval.
Wow,
clearance, I should say, yes. And, we were concerned. We were keeping an eye out on it, and pleasantly surprised, I guess happy that there were no delays in that process. I think from the business side, with regards to what's going on the pricing and most favored nation, policies that are being discussed, we are concerned about how that's going to affect potential future strategic views on valuation, right? Because you take out, significant potential portions of the, revenue forecast if you have to account for where that gets applied. So we anticipate there will be implications, and we'll have to work through those and prepare for them.
So Bethany, let's talk about the second big bottleneck we're experiencing for a number of years, and that is fundraising. Right? You were fortunate enough to have survived so far with a single fundraising round. Tell us the story behind that. How did that work?
Well, I think how it worked was we have two very good local, regional type of investors. So Westlake Biopartners and Versant, who have been strong supporters and behind us the whole time. But as you pointed out, we got that in 2019. It was a $50 million financing. That financing really drove our ability to industrialize the technology that came out of Caltech and to allow us to actually achieve the goal that we had, which was developing these next generation genetic medicines. With the technology and the data that we were generating, we were then successful in really gathering a lot of industry interest. And we were able to forge partnerships with both AbbVie and Lilly, which to date have brought in $250 million plus of non-dilutive funding. So it is clearly science-driven with good starting foundation from our investors. And I would say we really did focus on negotiating heavy on the upfronts because we knew we might need to have, some runway. And so that's worked in our favor.
So with that, I would just actually like to move to Nathan and Pelage, because you guys also have an interesting story about partnership with a strategic partner that did not end that well.
Yeah, another AbbVie story for you. About 5 years ago, Pelage was spun out of really the falling apart of the strategic partnership and having to form a company around the IP that no longer would be sort of transacted over to AbbVie, but the exclusive licensing agreement was entered into between Allergan at the time. This was prior to the AbbVie acquisition, and Pelage. And at the end of the day, spoiler alert, both parties did decide to walk away. And I think that one of the big lessons, from this story is that, we were a very small company and we were developing one asset, and a company like Allergan, even at the time, maybe you consider that mid-size, they had a portfolio of dermatology products. They had a portfolio of many different therapeutic area products. So there's already a disconnect between what we view as important and what they view as important. And so there was a lot of negotiating. There's a lot of sort of stakeholder management. There was a lot of really trying to get some people who could really vouch for us on the other side to relay the importance through the management structure to ensure that we were getting the investment, ensure that we were getting the attention that we felt like we needed in order to continue to move this asset along in development. And so, I think it was something we definitely had to keep in mind, about working with a much larger company and what was important. But the value of that partnership, I think, was the access of the scientific minds, right? We were a small shop of just a few people known as Pelage at the time, but now we get to tap into the scientific expertise that existed at Allergan with a very robust, comprehensive dermatology development team who has, decades and decades of experience doing this for a living, which was an invaluable asset for us. So some pros and cons definitely in this partnership. And I think at the end of the day, it ultimately resulted in us, kind of having to do this on our own. But, jokingly, the advice I would give is just don't let the company that's trying to acquire you get acquired, right? That's what you have to try to avoid, because there's always sort of these uncertain risks that you have to work through sometimes.
So Ken, the story behind Trethera is pretty much a story of almost a phoenix, right? The company. Well, you tell the story.
I think that's just about right. Maybe two phoenixes actually at Trethera. But yes, when I arrived at Trethera, I actually arrived as a board director. It had been going for several years, probably about 5 years at the time. And I'll always remember the phone call. It was a Goldman Sachs friend of mine. And he was like, I want you to, what do you think about being on the board of a startup? I was like, well, I'm already on a startup. I'm in a 120-person company in San Diego. And there was a little bit of a pause. And he said, well, that's not really a startup. So this was my first experience. But yeah, over that time period, they had tried to develop a drug that had a bit of an unclear clinical path, and certainly, certainly wasn't working out to the metric of 2 years and $10 million, to an IND and into clinic. What was interesting is when you're a board director, you don't know everything, but you know a little bit just to be dangerous. And there was another drug in the portfolio that looked incredibly interesting. So this was my first CEO role. I stepped into that, and we took the prior asset was removed. The new asset was developed, originally thought to be just a liquid tumors combinatorial drug, but as you see, whether it's our poster for Crohn's disease in the poster session, or Peter's presentation earlier about neurodegenerative diseases, or where we are now with solid tumors, we've really been able to take a pipeline and a product approach.
And Blaise, Cleopatra's approach is very, very different. I mean, you told me you're fundraising, but the sums you're talking about are very different, and your road to market is very different. So walk us through, the commercial path that you've chosen.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cleopatra has a really unique opportunity here. So our product, Pearl Pack, was actually discovered by our founder, co-founder, Rhonda Voskuil. She's a neurologist here at UCLA. So she was studying the impacts of estriol on the brain in multiple sclerosis. But this is a product that has been available for women with menopause, hot flashes in Europe for over 40 years. So there's plenty of safety data that's available. And so I think on a panel, I think it was yesterday, Rhonda has this, she's able to see patients. She's a doctor, and she's also a scientist. And so she's, noticed that connection there, that that estriol could have benefits for women with menopause. And so the key point to that, though, is that this estriol, it binds to neuroreceptors in the brain as opposed to the breast, which is what conventional HRTs do. And so we have, since it has safety data in Europe for over 40 years, we have taken a telemedicine approach to just distribute the product directly to consumers. So we took a product that's already available and made it available with a patent on the packaging and the delivery method. And so we've just totally gone straight to market, which is a very unconventional but very unique approach to commercializing a new drug.
So I just want to recognize that Dr. Voxer is sitting right here, the front row, and perhaps if time permits, we'll hear from you about the road of a faculty entrepreneur. Stay tuned. So with that, let's talk a bit about LA and our ecosystem here. You all chose to stay here, which is what we like to see, but potentially unusual. So talk to me about talent retention and talent hiring. How were you able to achieve that? Especially, does remote work play any role in that, or people in biotech really need to come into office to solve problems?
Happy to start. We have a rich, community of, great scientists to draw from. And I think that combined with great science has made it relatively, straightforward for us to get the local talent that we've needed. I think for recruiting outside of the area, it's pretty easy to sell the quality of life that you can have here. I lived in DC and I came here and I haven't left. And so, I think the quality of life, and then really importantly, we're starting to see, some of the ecosystem build around, new startup companies, the anchor, large pharma and Amgen and Kite Gilead help to be a helpful selling point when you're trying to bring in outside, talent.
I do think the virtual model works relatively well, depending on the stage of your company. We've kind of taken a cluster approach. There is talent that can be found in Los Angeles in drug development and medical devices, be it Medtronic or Amgen or kind of the things that come out of those sites. But also, given we manufacture and have our our site in San Diego, I mean, having CMC and quality down in San Diego, it's still just a 2-hour drive, but still able to monitor. So we've kind of taken a hybrid approach, I would say.
I'd say we're similar, hybrid approach, or well, I guess maybe more of a virtual approach. We have people in Houston, we have people in Oklahoma, we have people here, we have people in Denver, like myself. But yeah, we're definitely have the I guess hybrid work or remote work approach.
But Blaise, how do you, because you are actually already selling, how do you train your sales force, the nurses that speak with the patients?
Absolutely. So that all follows Dr. Rhonda Voskel's protocol. So I believe, she meets with them in person. We have a head, a chief commercial officer or head nurse that manages our clinical staff. So that information is being passed along with our nurses. And so whether that's virtually or in person, that's how we're passing on that information.
Yeah, I would just echo my panelists here. I mean, it's about a hybrid option, I think, and where you need those key functions that have to show up. Like we maintain a lab presence on the campus of UCLA at the Magnify facility in the incubator there. So a lot of the research that we do, it's hard to be a scientist and work from home. So we maintain that presence. We do some good science out of there, but we clearly recognize that if you want top talent, sometimes they're not co-located where you're at. You have to go out and find them. You have to be more open to flexible working arrangements or whatever it might be. I think that's the nature of how many companies have sort of evolved and their composition, especially small startup companies.
So all of you took academic projects from academia, most of you from UCLA, one from Caltech. And I'm willing to listen to criticism, but any advice for future CEOs or operators who would like to spin out a company out of academia, assuming that research we'll be able to keep innovative research in academia after whatever happens with NIH and NSF?
Oh, I'm happy to provide my perspective. I mean, we are fortunate to have founders from the lab of Viviana Grodnero actually at the company. And I've worked with them now almost 6 years. And I would have to say the first couple years was a little headbutting. And so I guess, in terms of, thoughts for founders to keep in mind is, the magic really happens when you're able to bring the innovation together with expertise and experience in whether it be drug development or diagnostic development or whatever the innovation is. And I think once we were able to get over that hump and kind of have that mutual respect, it really did help. And I think you surround yourself with folks that have experience that you don't have and be open to that so that you can make the best decisions together. It's very clear. There's no way, a business person without the scientist is going to sell anything, so it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I would say that I would just encourage everyone to try it at least once. It's an incredible experience. I spent 5 years at McKinsey & Company redesigning healthcare systems for over 1 million patients at a time. But in this startup land, you get to actually know those patients. You get to know them very well. And they come to your stockholder meetings because your stockholder meetings have 12 people at them and kind of tell them that, and they tell their story. I mean, our Lou Gehrig's patient number 1 is right here, a UCLA alumni, that we got to see on Friday. So it's very personal. It's where your own research, where probably your own thesis, rested. Isn't it just great to take it from publication and then take it into a patient? So I encourage everybody to take the route at least once.
I think that's great. I would encourage everyone to build something. Really, when you make something, when you take something that we were picking up Pearl Packs yesterday. That's what startups do. They do the manual labor too. But just seeing that package in your hand and something that has been created from an idea, like taking that, dreaming big, and we're going after a massive market. Half the population is worried about menopause and cognition. Everyone's worried about it. And just seeing that package in your hand and, knowing that you're distributing it is just a great feeling. And so I would, definitely encourage, swing for the fences.
Yeah. I think, Bethany, your point on growing pains resonates with me because thinking about the academic sort of private industry sponsor relationship here, there is a bit of a learning curve to overcome as it relates to how to develop a drug, right? And I think once you can get over that, you can really take advantage of the sort of ancestral knowledge that exists on developing a drug. I think anybody who's ever picked up a program in your life, you realize there's years and years of science behind that you're just having to get up to speed on. And so bringing in the scientists who've been there, bringing in the founders whose research helped to, guide the direction of a drug, that's kind of invaluable. And when you start asking the questions about an asset or a drug or a compound, they've likely already had the answer for many years, and to not take advantage of that and not have that as a constant resource would be sort of unfortunate.
So what will be the big news coming of, what are you looking forward to, being optimistic, coming out, big announcements coming out of your companies, 2025, 2026? What are you looking forward to in achieving that year? So as I keep saying, every time I'm on stage with someone from Pelage, I have a boardsman interest in your success. So personally, I'm looking forward for your phase 2 trials results.
I'm already using the product.
Yeah. Yeah, just you're hired, Ken. Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's easy to think of Pelage as a one-trick pony, right? We have a phase 2 asset right now. We're really excited about it. And certainly we're developing a product in a space where there's been just a barren wasteland of innovation. I mean, there's not been an FDA-approved product in 20 plus years for hair loss. I think people will know the words Rogaine and Propecia, and those are the latest ones that are available, right? So we have a very novel mechanism of action. We're targeting hair follicle stem cells. It's very exciting. And I think that, as we continue through our clinical trial progress and we can communicate results, I mean, that's everything for us. And being able to, get this product in the consumer's hands. I was just having a conversation outside. There are a line of people who want to be in the trials and who want this yesterday. So we're really excited about that.
Blaise, perhaps you first of all tell your recent marketing success and then what you hope it will lead to.
Yeah, absolutely. You were trying to, or you asked me what would, an announcement that would be great, but we already, had one that was great. We were just on Oprah, which was incredible. And also New York Times. We've just had, over the last 2 or 3 months, we've had just a slew of positive PR. And honestly, none of that would have been possible without, having the research for the product done right here at UCLA. And so establishing those relationships has just been so important for our company to get off the ground. And now we have, we doubled our patient list over the last 2 or 3 months. And so it's hard to think of something that's bigger than Oprah, but maybe it's closing the fundraising round, and also having a couple partner clinics. We're involved at the or Dr. Voskuhl treats patients here at the UCLA Menopause Clinic, and so expanding to the clinics that are in Houston or that are in Cleveland Clinic. Those would be great announcements for us. But we've done a lot, and I'll keep thinking on that next announcement.
Well, I'll propose something: sending a royalty check to UCLA.
I think we're required.
Yeah, I think for Trethera, things are also starting to really align for us. And we had a nice press release yesterday that Dr. Ben Greenberg has come on board. And now we have this beautiful trifecta to take our first-in-class drug into a disease that has no approved therapies, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, which is generally of 6 or 8-year-old children where they go into seizures, stop breathing. And about 50% of them have long-term morbidity, even mortality, and about 15% of them. So now that we have Harvard, Stanford, and UT Southwestern all locked up, and are also the only drug ever designated orphan drug for this disease. It's tricky to start in children and pediatrics, but we really look forward to that over the next year or so.
That's great. Yeah, I think I mentioned one of the big milestones we just had last week, which was the IND clearance for our first program, which is a developmental epileptic encephalopathy due to STXBP1 mutations. That was not only obviously a great milestone for the disease area, but it was also a huge milestone.
Do you mind if I stop you?
Sure.
Some of us, like me, are not scientists.
Oh, me either.
Okay, so can you explain the disease in like a laser? So someone like me who can
I can
understand it.
try. Yeah.
Do
Okay.
it.
So essentially, patients that have this mutation, it's a haplo insufficient mutation, are not able to form synaptic vesicles. So essentially, you get poor communication going on brain wide, every neuron in the brain. So the manifestations of that are epilepsy, developmental disorders, cognitive delays. You typically end up with a child that stays at the development stage of 2 years old. Yeah. And are in diapers their entire life, and then are at risk of dying ultimately of sudden death due to epilepsy. So it's a very grievous, serious illness. Okay, so it's a rare disorder, not ultra rare, rare. And so we're super excited. Obviously the advocacy groups are excited. And the only reason that this is even possible is because of the technology we developed that allows us to cross the blood-brain barrier after IV delivery and actually reach all the neurons and have up to 70% transduction expression to basically compensate for the mutated through the replacement of the STXBP1 gene. So that's exciting, but it's also a huge milestone for the platform, because that same capsid is the capsid that we're using for our program that is expected to also have IND clearance this quarter, which is for Parkinson's disease due to GBA1 mutations. So we're doing both rare and more common diseases and hope to have that IND as well announced this quarter and then move into the clinic. And that is, for us, that's been the vision. Yeah. So it's a big year for Capsida.
So in your various paths here, I think one common thing is that you have to be resilient, overcome obstacles. Any regret, something that you would have done differently since the day you started with this kind of crazy ride?
Also, yeah.
Yeah, I think looking back, I came from a very large company background. And so I didn't have the full visibility of like clinical operations apart from maybe monthly report-ins, to the executive teams. And, looking back when we started our first phase 1 trial, which was about 3.5 years ago, it still remained mysterious, right? Because, a third party was, doing the CRO sort of work. And I wasn't as, it's not that hard, honestly, to run a phase 1 trial with 40 or 50 patients. And so I think looking back, if you pull that in-house in a virtual hybrid model, which it sounds like all of us are doing at this stage of our company development, it's really possible. There's not a lot of mystery to clinical operations, and it gets you a lot closer to the physicians, to the patients. And I think it's just probably the wave of the future as people go forward.
So if there are no regrets, any very, very good decisions you've made along the way, did you say, okay, this was really a good one?
Yeah, so I was going to flip your question that way. So for Capsida, one of the big decisions we had to make, but we knew it was one we had to be very, very thoughtful about, was that we actually invested in our own manufacturing capability. And that was a significant decision with regards to, even having sort of a base infrastructure. We've done it in a very staged and phase appropriate way, but it was, a smart strategic decision. Glad we did it. And we are now not only the manufacturer for our own programs, but also for AbbVie and for Novartis. So that has been a good one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I think, it's hard to have regrets when everything you do, you think it's the right thing to do, right? One of the improvements I think that we did one of the corners we had to turn was doing a phase 1 study, which is pretty manageable to do yourself, and now do a phase 2 study, right? So the complexity goes up, the risk goes up, the cost goes up, et cetera, the resource need goes up. I think having a really, really comprehensive CRO search was really valuable for us. We did a very exhaustive search, and we had a very refined criteria We wanted a small to mid-sized CRO that was niche in dermatology, that had lots of experience in hair loss trials. And you start to like have the selection criteria, and you really whittle down to like 2 or 3 CROs that all had good experience, but we wanted to find the best one. And from that point, negotiating with them to engage on a partnership, an exclusive partnership agreement with them to run hair loss studies as a company, we've now locked up a great CRO. We've locked up good team members on the CRO side that we're happy with. And it allows us as an organization to still remain very lean and operate and deliver on milestones in a high quality fashion, which I think is extremely rare, especially when you're working with CROs.
I think that for us, where we're at today, the life cycle of a startup, it just seems like this is the way that it's supposed to happen. I mean, there's been a lot of grit and a lot of grind from the co-founder, obviously, from where it started and where it is today. I think that there are a lot of things that we can obviously do better. I mean, we track all of our patients and their progress. I think in terms of a marketing perspective and just getting the product out and understanding what works well, that's probably something that we can do a little better in terms of tracking, but we're setting those up. We're just running a lean operation is difficult because there's so many critical things that you need to do at a certain point in time. And so I don't fault us for doing anything, at a certain point in time because it had to get done. But I think that is kind of what a startup is like. So we've identified some of those things and we're doing them better. And so with more resources, we'll do them even better than that.
So what are the current funding channels that you see that are open in the market? Or we heard that IPOs are getting further away, perhaps not 2025. They keep telling us next quarter. Then does it come? So what is open today for startup companies? Nothing much.
Well, I mean, we're in I think a fortunate place because we did our Series A back in 2019, so we don't have to necessarily address the hyper evaluations that occurred back in 21, 22. So that's always a path that we consider. I would say that right now, one of the key things we're thinking about is just making sure that we're making, creating options as it relates to further partnering opportunities, creating options as it relates to pursuing nonprofit funding such as CIRM or other foundation funding. I mean, I think we have to be agile, and I think we're taking a very broad look at how to first prioritize what we're funding, very data-driven decision-making, and then exploring all options for the different programs. Yeah.
We've taken a 2-pillar approach where we've had angel investors in one arm and then non-dilutive grant funding in the other, which has been able to pull in a little bit over $15 million over the last 3 years. We'd love to have more, but we realized that if Wall Street is closed, the NIH is open. So we went for the grants. Now, after today's presentations, I guess we're going to have to find the third pillar, wherever that may be. But we also are broadening our outreach. So running like a Reg D 506C, so kind of a bit more of a general solicitation seed round, which is different than the usual approach of just going to UCLA alumni and people that we know. So casting a broad net, having redundancy, all of that is how you survive and even thrive in an environment like today.
Yeah, I think you're right. Being agile in terms of your fundraising is important. We've been very fortunate to have a couple angel investors who have continually put money into the business. We've raised about $2.5 million. We just applied for an NIH SBIR grant. That'll be reviewed here in June. So hopefully, that comes out as well as it can be. But this seed round, or I guess we're somewhere between seed and A, but I'm going to call it seed. But we're pursuing that. So really just being agile, like you said, Ken, and what's available is available.
I think the only thing I would add is thinking outside the U.S., thinking about regional licensing rights for non-dilutive opportunities for funding. We're a small operation. I don't envision us running trials in Europe. I don't envision us running trials in Japan or in China. And there is a lot of venture capital investment money outside the U.S. And you decide for yourselves in your own organizations if that makes sense for you. But there have been ripe opportunities to solicit non-dilutive funding through those means. particularly that's part of your corporate business strategy to say, we want nothing to do with Asia Pac. So, we'll take a nice upfront for that, and you guys can have it and run it and develop it and sell it.
Good. We have a few more minutes. I want to see if there are any questions from the audience.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Amir and to UCLA and Judy Gasson and John Mazziota. There have been people who, as a professor here, I've been here for 25 years, and the kind of place UCLA is, you just can't say enough for supporting their researchers. They help us make the clinics better, but they also make the scientists who have a dream, and they make it come true. And what can you say? And for me to think about, I've had a lot of NIH grants, I've had a lot of papers, but at this phase of my life, after being here for 20 years, to think about, coming up with the treatment for women who, again, half the population has worried about cognition and menopause and hasn't talked about they're at the peak of their careers, peak of their lives, and now they're beginning to lose verbal memory, processing speed, and their heads of families, their heads of their jobs, and to see their mothers in every memory care ward they go to filled up with Alzheimer's patients. So, to be able to now, in this phase, through UCLA support, to be able to work on something like that big, that 70% of, menopausal women have cognitive issues, and all of them are worried about them. And so, take it on, and, we got one shot in life, so let's do it, right? And UCLA, you can do it. Go Bruins.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for our panelists. That's a way to finish the panel. Thank you so much.